Okay, there you are. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Great. Okay, we're back and we're recording. Excellent.
Okay.
So we're looking good. Hopefully we'll have some others join us.
And now that this is all recorded, it's going to go on our YouTube channel for the office.
Market Center YouTube channel.
Perfect.
See up in the left-hand corner, it says recording. How are you doing? Okay?
Hanging in there.
It's a challenging time right now.
Mhm.
You know, I think it's challenging to stay motivated when the inventory is low, especially if the bulk of your business is working with buyers, which is why we need to be listing centric,
Absolutely.
meaning seller listing centric, because that allows us to continue to work and sort of control the market in a way. Or I should say, I hate to use that word control, at least influence the market strongly.
Right. And I don't know if you saw the Facebook post from Nate Jenkins. He bought a 3-family
Well, that's great.
and he was saying how he explained how it was off market and how he got it. So I think that's what I'm going to be doing. I have a couple of buyers and there's nothing on the market and just start sending out letters.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that in the past, actually. I've gone out looking for business that way, sending letters to absentee owners or even just, you know, owners in general of neighborhoods that I'm interested in.
That's the way to do it.
Yep. Yep. I had several private sales that I had represented last year in 2020. I think I had 3 last year, which was great. You know, I negotiated a reduced fee, and it worked out to be wonderful for you know, for my clients. Quite honestly, in all 3 cases, I represented the seller, and it worked out incredibly well in that they had far less preparation, far less stress. In one case, it was a multifamily. It was a 2-family, and the new owner was a neighbor who lived across the street, and they were able to keep the tenant, so the tenant didn't have to move, and it just worked out wonderfully well. So in a market like this, we need to be very creative, and we also need to be very mindful of treating our clients with the greatest care, which can be it can be easy to sort of fall down on the job a bit when there isn't any inventory. So
Right.
I think this class is probably pretty timely today. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Good, thanks.
So Melissa, can you say a little bit more before we get started about the 2-family? So you said you were representing the seller, so you had sent out letters?
I had not in that case, but it was a situation where a friend of mine, through my BNI group, someone who had formerly been in the BNI group had contacted me to say, hey, prices are so high. We're thinking about selling a 2-family that we have in Milton. We haven't lived there for a long time. It was their initial home that they owned together. And they were interested in flipping the funds essentially to buy a commercial property where she could locate her business. So she explained to me up front that she thought she may have a buyer for it, but what is it worth? So we went through the whole, analysis process of what's it worth on today's market? What can we expect? What do you have to do to get it ready? And it wasn't a neglected property, but it had enough wear and tear on it that there was a good amount that they felt that they were going to need to do to get it market ready. So She ended up choosing instead to go the private sale route with a seller. The buyer was a neighbor who lived directly across the street and wanted to purchase the property. So one unit was vacant. We were able to keep the tenant in the second unit, and it was great for everyone. It was great for the tenant in that she didn't have to move. It was great for the buyer in that they were able to immediately have the cash flow of that occupied unit. And it was great for the seller in that they saved a bit on the fee for service, and they didn't have to spend any money to get the property ready. So,
Yeah, win-win overall.
so if, hi Teresa, I see you're on too, and hi Mary. If you have the ability to turn your camera on, it would just be a huge favor for me, but I understand if you don't. Want to. Thank you.
Scary, but
In the squares and names, so thank you. Well, we have a couple of people log on and join us, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if they do log on a little bit later, then they'll just have to catch up. So thanks for tuning into the class today. Really, this class encompasses, two things. One is clear in that we're going to talk about the contract that you can use. And it's never been more important now, ever than it is now to get a buyer contract signed, given the lack of inventory on the market. You want to make sure that you've really got your buyer in the fold and that they understand what your role is, and you can get them contractually obligated to work with you, which is a positive for them as well as for you. And then third would be, we can talk a bit about just the logistics of how you go through that consultation to actually get the contract signed. So why don't we begin? So I have a handout that I can share with all of you. I'll start my screen share here. So these are just my notes on how I'm going to go about sort of outlining the class today. And I'll see if I can figure out how to load them into the chat as well before we log off. So, okay. So first, like I said, it's never been more important than right now to get a buyer contract signed. And what does this mean in terms of your obligation? Well, you're going to have to brush up on your VP or your value proposition so that you can have a great buyer consultation. So whenever I work with a buyer, I've got a couple of rules. And first and foremost is I'm only going to meet with a client if they have been pre-approved or I know that they are motivated to be pre-approved. And if they're not, that's okay, because I can, in part of my consultation, pass them along to a great referral, a great lender who's going to take really good care of them. And that only benefits me in terms of how I can maybe then best negotiate for them if they're working with a great lender who's recognized in the market. So consultation, rule number one, I always start with an interview. And if you're working with buyers out there in the market, they call you up and they say, I want to see this, I want to see that, I want to see this, I want to see that. That's great. And it's wonderful to have that lead, but really you are best served to have a consultation with them first, always. And this is a chance for you to interview them, but also for them to interview you. So whenever I get a call from a new client that is a buyer, I will always encourage them to set up the consultation with me. And what I say to them is something to this effect. I'd like to invite you to, sit with me. Now we do it on Zoom as opposed to in person, to talk about what your purchase looks like. This interview is going to be all about you. I want to learn all about you, what your timeline looks like, what your goals are, what your dreams are, and that way I can put a great plan in motion for you so that you can buy a house that's exactly what you're looking for. Does that sound good to you? And they always say yes. And I'll let them know that, it lasts anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, and that clients, my past clients, have always told me that when they take the time to have this initial interview with me, they end up having a smooth and less stressful buying experience when they choose to sit with me. So that usually is the clincher, and they're happy to tune in with me for about an hour or so. So this is really my chance to interview them, even though I might pitch it to them as this is their chance to interview me. So we're kind of getting to know each other. So the most important thing is that I understand their needs and expectations. So tell me, buyer, Miss Smith or Miss Jones or whatever her name is, what are you thinking about? What's causing you to want to buy a property right now? So they'll give me some information about that. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a single family, a multifamily? Those are all the basic questions that you're going to want to cover in your initial consultation with them. And what I'm really doing is listening to what their expectations are. Where do they want to purchase? What does this property look like? What does the inventory look like on what they're looking to purchase? If they're looking to buy something at $300,000 on the South Shore right now, I'm going to have a really frank conversation with them about this is what the inventory looks like on the South Shore at $300,000. There's very little available, and this is what is available. These are the locations that will be available to you, and this will be the size of the property, the condition of the property, and you'll be lucky to have, 2 bedrooms. If we have 3 bedrooms, it's going to be something that needs a lot more work. So this initial consultation also puts the onus on me to understand what's happening in the market as well, so that I can set some realistic expectations for them. That's important because you want to establish yourself as the professional. And if they get the sense that you really don't know much about the market, then that might be a bit of an uphill climb for you. For those of you who are newer to the real estate business, no worry. You can skip that aspect altogether. You just want to have a good understanding of what they're looking for. And then at a subsequent time, you'll want to come back and have some suggestions for them as to where they can look and what type of properties they might be looking at. So this is also an opportunity for you to explain the benefits or the value that you bring to the table. Outside of just reviewing the market conditions to them, you're going to want to talk about your role in the transaction. I'll cover that a little bit more as we move through this conversation. A great thing that you can do for them right now is talk with them about what the current market conditions are. Regardless of where they're looking or what price point they're going to be looking in or the type of property that they're looking for, you're going to have, you're going to want to have a conversation with them about, listen, right now there's very little inventory. It doesn't matter what kind of property you're looking for or what the price point is, there's just not a lot out there. So if you are expecting to, walk in and be able to dictate your own terms and try to bargain with the seller, you're going to want to rethink that. This isn't a comps market. This is a strategy market for both the seller and for the buyer. If you're thinking that you're not going to have any competition and you're going to be able to name your price, you're going to have to rethink that. So if a property comes on the market and it seems to be very well priced, there are going to be 20 buyers right behind us who are going to be thinking the same thing. Wow, this is a great property. It's well priced. I'm going to have a lot of competition. We're going to have to try to put together an offer that will be attractive to the seller, but still be tolerable for you. So part of your role is helping the buyer to prepare about what to expect, not just finding the property for them, but what to expect is going to happen when they do find it. So this is, again, a chance for you to build your professional image. So talk with them about the timeline. What does the timeline look like? Do you know what a timeline looks like? Have you bought or sold a property before in the past? Ask them those questions. If they haven't, even if they have, let's review the timeline and what that's going to look like. What's the structure of a transaction? So it's not as simple as, oh, great, we found the house, let's make an offer, fantastic, we're going to go ahead and buy it. You'll want to set up a timeline for them of, okay, these are the monies that are going to be needed. This is what the offer is going to look like. You may want to review paperwork with them. You may want to talk with them about whether or not they want to have an inspection, what the ramifications of an inspection can look like. Also, an inspection is not an automatic license to attempt to renegotiate the offer with the seller. You're going to want to talk to them about that deposit that comes at the offer and then that subsequent deposit that comes at the purchase and sale agreement. Then what does the timeline look like from purchase and sale agreement to commitment and then from commitment to closing? So I have always found that if I take the time to answer their questions and to understand their needs and set some expectations for them, they generally are feeling quite comfortable about working with me and signing on with me. So what you may need to do or want to do, and I would suggest following their cues, talk with them about an important aspect of the inspection, and that would be twofold. It would be radon testing as well as lead paint testing. So those are different classes. However, if you do take the time to explain those things to them, again, that's a way for you to establish your level of professionalism with them, and it builds the level of trust that they will have with you, which leads to an easier signing of the agreement. Does that make sense to you guys? You know, if you're building your trust with them, are you going to have a better chance at getting the contract signed? I mean, I definitely think so. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so before we review any terms of the contract, I'll show you the one that I use. Let's use some time to talk about the benefits of signing the contract. So first and foremost, this is loyalty from the client. Once you've signed an agreement with them, they're going to owe you a fee within the parameters of the contract if they make a purchase within the time frame that you've set out in the contract. So once they've signed with you, they owe you a fee. So they can't, I mean, they can go off and attempt to purchase a property elsewhere with another agent or another realtor or even privately, but if they are under contract with you during that time, they owe you the fee. Also, this might be a surprise to some of you, that the loyalty is also now for you to offer to your client. When you sign this agreement with your client, this explains your fiduciary responsibility. It commits you, the professional, the licensee, to the client as well. So this is going to light a fire under your feet too. And you're going to want to make sure that for every contract that you get signed, that you are fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility, that you are diligently searching for a property for them and with them. And, you know, if you have a buyer agreement under contract and you don't contact that client for, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that's not going to feel so good for the client, is it? You're going to need to keep that channel of communication moving and open. And even if it means every couple of days, hi there, Mary Jones. I don't see that there's anything that's come on the market that's exciting or meets your parameters this week. Would you say the same? So you're also going to want to find a way to make sure that they're receiving the multiple listings that are coming on the market. You can set them up through the MLS directly, or you can use your KW app. Either one will work. So remember, this isn't just the client now committed to you and paying you a fee, but this is your responsibility to the client as well. A good buyer contract is going to describe what you do and maybe even mention someplace what you do not do. And I will share my contract with you as we move through. This also is a customizable contract. And, granted, you don't want to be omitting important parts of the contract, but it's a way for you to determine how you want to use it, what kind of a fee you want to charge, what kind of a fee you'll collect from the MLS. And you most definitely want to have an attorney review it with you if you're going to start slicing and dicing and changing. And you do have a couple of options as to which contract you want to use, and we'll look at both of those. Also, one aspect of this initial consultation that I find to be the most important for me to keep me sane is, if I have this initial consultation, I'm going to be able to determine right from the very beginning if this is going to be the best use of my time. It gives me the insight into what their personalities might be like, what their expectations are like. If they think that, they want, oh, hey, I want to buy a house in the next 12 months. Well, is this going to be a great use of my time to follow them around for 12 months or have them, work with me and occupy my valuable time for 12 months if really they don't want to make a purchase till November of 2021? Is that going to be the best use of my time? So that's something else you're going to want to cover at the consult as well. And the consult helps you to zero in on what their needs are, what their motivation is. Are they shoppers or are they really buyers? And I always ask that question. If we were to go out and look at properties together this weekend and we found exactly what you wanted to buy, what would you do? And if they say, oh, I'd write an offer, great. If they say, oh, well, I'd want to think about it, or I'm not sure, maybe I'm not ready. So, you have to use that initial time with the client, both the consultation and, maybe it takes a couple of showings to really understand what their motivation looks like. If they find what they want, if they have found 3 properties in 2 weeks that suit all their needs and they can't pull the trigger and they don't want to make an offer, then you have to sort of reassess. Are they buyers or are they shoppers? What's going to turn them into a buyer? And do they just want to use my time, or do they really want to make a purchase? Because the one thing that we don't get paid for is our time until we close. And it doesn't matter if we spend 5 hours with this client or 500 hours with this client, we're still only going to get paid once for the one closing that we're able to bring them to. Does that make sense? Okay. So that consultation forces a more productive conversation and leads you to better discovery and understanding with your client. The contract will include a time frame, so you can make it for a short period of time, or you can make it for a long period of time. I always like to present them with the contract at that initial consult, but I don't sign it with them. And some realtors find that really surprising. Like, isn't that the goal of the consult, to get the contract signed? Well, yes, definitely. And I'll sign it with them if I feel really comfortable with them. And I just have no reason to doubt that they'll want to, make a transaction come to fruition with me. Sometimes, more usually, I will wait till I've toured a couple of properties with them before I'll actually sign the agreement, because I want to get a feel for, again, what are their expectations, and they're going to be surprised by what they see. And more often than not, that's what I'll do with first-time buyers. If they've purchased with me in the past, then of course I already have the loyalty that I've been working on for years. Or if they have bought and sold with a realtor in the past and they feel comfortable working with me and I feel comfortable working with them, then I'm going to get that contract signed sooner than later. Usually what I'll do is, if I haven't already signed it, when I share paperwork with them through Dotloop or DocuSign to write up that first offer, I'll typically send out the contract that we've already reviewed together but maybe haven't signed yet at that point. And I'll ask them to sign the agreement first, and then an agency, the Mass Mandatory Licensee Consumer Form, otherwise called the agency disclosure, followed by the rest of the paperwork. So you can sign it at the consult, you can sign it after the consult, after they've had time to review it, or you can sign it a little bit further out when you've had time to kind of review them, in a sense. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Have any of you had, so this is a question for all of you, have any of you had a really difficult experience with a client and wish that you hadn't worked with them? Feel free. Anybody?
I wouldn't say I don't wish that I didn't work with them, because we ended up selling the house, but this was one, and it was my very first one, that the client was adamant about her price, because her brother, who was a commercial real estate person, told her the price they should get, and all the neighbors, and she didn't want to go down, and I knew that it was well overpriced. And so the house ended up on the market for quite a while. When she finally realized and had to come down, it eventually sold, but it was really frustrating,
Sure.
so.
Yep, I understand that, Teresa. My first transaction, I had the same issue where the seller chose the price. It was well outside of the range that I felt it would sell for, but being new and eager and encouraged, don't worry, you can always lower the price later. And I took my first listing was well overpriced as well, and made for an uncomfortable transaction. The same can happen on the buy side, where if a buyer just has unrealistic expectations of what they're going to be able to pay for a property, or what they want to pay for a property, given current market conditions, then you can avoid that by having a great consultation with them in the beginning and understanding what their expectations are. So, one of the big red flags right up front can be, well, I'm never going to pay a seller more than what they're asking. You know what, this market then might not be a great time for you to be looking at property. And I don't say that because you have to pay the seller more than what they're asking, but current market conditions, again and again and again, are showing us that properties that are well priced come on the market and the seller receives multiple bids and they sell well over their asking price. From day one, the offers are going to be well over the asking price. So if you have this thought in your mind of, well, I don't want to pay more than they're asking, why would I do that? Then this could end up being an exercise for you and for me in just writing up offer paperwork and being fit and failing time and time and time again. So if you're willing to go through the comps with me, and we can then come up with a strategy of what you feel is the highest price that you want to offer, then we have a good chance of getting your offer accepted. Is that something that you would be interested in doing? And then listen to what their response is. And if they're saying, no, I would never offer more than what a seller is asking, then maybe this isn't a great client for you to take on right now. Maybe you want to refer it out to somebody else, which I know sounds crazy, but maybe you do. So this is where the initial consult comes in and why it's so important. And as you gather experience under your belt over time, you'll begin to see those red flags more easily, even earlier in the conversations. And it doesn't mean that you can't work with the client, but it certainly helps you to adjust your expectations. Does that make sense?
It does. Melissa, I had just started working with somebody that signed an agreement with me a few weeks ago, and we went to see a house that she was very interested in, and they offered 50,000 over and didn't get it. And it was so disappointing. And I felt like we were trying to be creative with our offer. There were no contingencies. She was putting a good amount down. We offered more with the first escrow check. And so it became disappointing. And I was just wondering what I could have done differently.
Well, that's a great question. Well, good work in getting first of all, good work, Teresa, in getting the agreement signed, because it's not always easy to do that. And second, good work on being creative. And the challenge is, and I face it myself, as do many veterans in our office, is that it doesn't matter how many mastermind sessions we go to and how creative we think we are and how great the lender is. There are always other offers floating around in the background, and we don't necessarily know what those are going to look like. Sometimes for the seller, it's all about the price. Sometimes for the seller, it's about a down payment. Sometimes it's about waiving their home inspection, or maybe it's a cash offer. We don't always know. In fact, we typically never know what the other competitive offers are going to look like. So we can only make the best offer that we possibly can with our buyer, and that's part of the consult that we want to have right now. I don't encourage my buyers to not have a home inspection, but I do let them know that because the market is so competitive, there are many buyers out there who are not having a home inspection right now. They're electing to not inspect. And if you choose to do that, these are the risks. Or if you choose to, place an appraisal contingency on your offer, these are the risks. If you want to waive your appraisal condition, these are the risks. If you offer 50 over asking, these are the risks, and it generally relates to appraisal. So you're going to want to be well versed in those things. So I don't know, Teresa, that there could have been anything else that you could have done to get the offer accepted outside of just knowing what all the other ones looked like and what was most important to the seller. So I do always try to have that conversation with the seller's agent. What's important to your seller. And these days, even just getting a call back from the seller's agent, I feel like is a great accomplishment, because they're inundated with showing requests and, silly questions and bigger questions, important questions, offers coming at them. There's just a lot of work involved with having a listing right now. So any listing agent worth their salt is going to want to field all those questions and calls, because they know that will lead to maybe the best results for their sellers. But we rely on assuming that the seller's agent is going to do all those things for us, and generally they're not.
Yeah.
So,
He was great. He did call back and he kept apologizing. I'm so sorry. Your offer was right there and it was really tough. And if anything happens, we'll call you back in the next few days. And,
yeah.
But it didn't give me any indication of what really happened.
Yeah, I always appreciate when they do. it's great insight for us, but it doesn't necessarily even apply to the next offer that buyer will be making. So the market is so competitive. I've heard, story after story after story since Thanksgiving, really, 10 offers, 15 offers, 20 offers. How do we compete with that? It's really difficult to get your offer noticed. But that's, again, another piece of that conversation that you're going to want to have with your buyers when you consult with them. So I would encourage you, we should move on to the contract so that we have enough time for me to answer your questions, but I would just really encourage you at this important time to attend as many mastermind sessions as you can, ask as many questions of your mentors and your colleagues as you can, and just try to make offers that are as rock solid as you can make them for your buyers' tolerances, if that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at the contract. So you have an option as to which contract you want to use. Oh, wait a minute, I don't need that, sorry. Okay, we have, start with this one. Okay, so our office, as we know, in .loop and in Transaction Desk has forms that they provide to us. And you do want to use a form that has been provided to us, and just be careful about how you are filling it in and laying it out. This one is the Mass Association of Realtors form, exclusive buyer agency agreement. This is available to you. I don't use this one. I use the Greater Boston form myself. That's just my preference. That's what I elected to do. They're very similar in that these agreements are going to spell out that, it is an exclusive agreement to purchase. It's going to ask you to fill out the brokerage information, which is our office, Keller Williams Showcase Properties, number 7737, and the buyer. So you are not the broker. That's important to know. You are not the broker. You are the agent representing the broker. The broker is Keller Williams Showcase Properties. And you would fill in the term, make this for as long as short as you want. I typically do mine in segments of 60 days because if it does turn out that the clients are kind of, wacky and I don't want to work for them for longer than that, at least I have an easy out to terminate the contract at the end date. And we always have the option to extend the contract, and you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that.
Melissa, I'm sorry. Are you sharing this?
I am. Do you see it?
I don't.
You don't see it? Okay.
No.
Let's see. Huh. Okay. Give me just a second here. Because it says I am sharing. What do you see? Tell me what you see.
I see the original thing that you had up, your outline.
Yeah. Okay. So let me close that. And close. All right. I see. Okay. Now we have to share this. You can see that now. Exclusive buyer agency agreement. Okay, great. All right, fine. I'm not a professional on Zoom. Learning curve. So as I was saying, this is the Mass Association of Realtors form, exclusive buyer agency agreement. And again, you want to make sure that you fill in the broker as Keller Williams Showcase Properties, not you. Okay, very important. You are not the broker of record. Steve Zabosky is our broker of record. You'll see that this is going to spell out, again, the terms of the agency and meaning the timeline. This will have a pretty specific paragraph on what your responsibilities are, what the buyer's duties are, what the compensation is going to look like, disclosure of other potential buyers for the same properties. Other provisions is where you would fill in, at least in this agreement, what they're looking for. I'm going to stop sharing this one and I'm going to share with you the one that I use because I find it to be a lot more descriptive. So I use this buyer representation agreement with consent to designated agency, and this is the Greater Boston Real Estate Board form. So I find this to be a little bit more malleable in what I prefer the agreement to say, as well as the fact that this does have the buyer consenting to designated agency, which means that only I will represent this buyer. If you recall in the class that we teach in the forms that you use for the Mass Mandatory licensee consumer relationship form, which is where you're checking off, you know, are you representing them as a seller, or are you representing them as a buyer? That you are checking off that you are representing them with designated agency. This is a repetition of that. And keep in mind that when you have signed a buyer disclosure form, when you've used that Mass Mandatory form, that is not a contract of representation. That is simply a disclosure. This is the contract for representation with the buyer, just as the listing agreement that you sign with the seller is the contractual agreement, the contract with the seller. And you know, I hadn't thought to mention till now, you would never represent a seller in a listing without an agreement, right? Without a contract. So why would you agree to represent a buyer without a contract? So where it is so difficult right now for buyers to, for us to even come up with property to show our buyers, you know, why would we work without a contract? You're really going to want to keep them loyal to you and in the fold. And this is another way for you to do that. So this is a form that you can get off of DocuSign or Dotloop, regardless of which format you like to use. And you'll see that this is, you know, similar things that the first agreement had listed on it, but this is a little more detail oriented. So this agreement is made between, so this will be the buyer, and then again, you'll fill in the broker, which is Keller Williams Showcase Properties. Then this form asks you to outline a little more specifically, okay, what are we looking at? What are we looking for? So be specific about these things, and you want to encompass as much in the detail about what you're looking for with this buyer, so that if they stray outside of, you know, where they indicated they wanted to be looking, that you still want to have them really contractually obligated to pay you the fee. So are they looking for all of us, I think we're going to be looking for residential property. Are they looking for a single family? Maybe a condo if it's the right condo. Is it a vacation home, a multifamily, an investment property? Other, you know, that could be, I don't know, I suppose other, you could always check off for owner occupancy if you wanted to, but you want to be as specific as possible. If there's a chance they're going to buy a condo, include it.
Melissa, I'm so sorry, but I don't see this again.
You don't see it?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing this again. So
I think every time you change, you have to go in and out of sharing.
can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you see that here, line item number 1, where you can check off residential, single family, multi-investment condo. You can all see that? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. General description. This is where I'll write in, you know, just a general description of the property. And this comes directly from what the buyer is telling me. Well, we're looking for something that isn't any smaller than 1,000 square feet. We want at least 2 or 3 bedrooms, as many as 4 bedrooms, 1 or more baths. Doesn't matter if it has a garage. I'll list all the generalities and be as encompassing in scope as I can be, so that if they end up buying a 2-bedroom, it's not outside the scope of what I've written on the contract. Geographic location, same thing. What if they tell me, okay, I'm looking at, I want to buy in Weymouth and Abington and Whitman. Okay, I'll put in Weymouth, Abington, Whitman, and then I might encompass and those towns immediately surrounding. Or I might say to them, would you be comfortable if we found something in Rockland? Or how about Hanson, or even, you know, Braintree? I try to put as much information in here as possible, because it brings the scope of what they're looking for more focused, even though it's in a more a wider range of parameters. I'll put the price range in as well. That's important. I usually don't put in a minimum. I'll just put in whatever their maximum might be. And then there's number 2, the period of this agreement. So this is going to be your timeline. So remember, think about this. How much pain and suffering do you want to tolerate over a long period of time or a short period of time? And, generally speaking, if you've done a great job in screening your clients, you're going to want to extend it if you haven't found a time frame for them, if you haven't found a property for them by the end of the time frame on the contract. Okay, this part's important. Number 3, the broker, meaning really you, should be using reasonable and diligent efforts to locate the property and negotiate terms and conditions that are acceptable to the buyer. So that's important. That's your responsibility right there. Number 3, that's your responsibility to the buyer. Number 4 talks about the buyer's responsibility in that, are they going to pay you a fee? Now, personally, and I can share these documents with you, personally, I don't charge a retainer fee. Some buyer agents do assign a retainer fee. I don't have them pay anything up front and return it to them in the transaction or just collect a fee. I don't do that. I collect whatever is offered to me on the MLS listing offering, and we'll get to that a little bit more specifically. So I just write in, you can see here, I'm hovering over the NA at number 4. So I don't charge a fee. So I put in NA for the retainer fee. Number 5, the buyer agrees to pay a fee equal to, and this is where I indicate see additional terms and conditions. So I designate a little bit more specificity as we go through the contract, but this is basically what the buyer is agreeing to. The broker will have deemed to have earned a full fee when the terms of this conditions are satisfied hereunder. A, when the buyer takes title of the property. So that means when the deed is actually transferred to them in their name. Or if they sign a contract with me and they assign it to another buyer, which I've never seen happen. Item C, if the buyer signs a contracted person, which consists of an option, and then the buyer allows the option, I think it says to pass along to another party. So if they sign an option, meaning an option to reassign, then they're still going to owe me the fee. Item D, or in the event that during the term of this agreement, the buyer or any person acting on the buyer's behalf enters into a contract and acquires the property, whether or not, some of this might be cut off, whether or not the services have been through me. So what that means is if anyone is assigned as a power of attorney on the buyer's behalf, and ultimately if the buyer ends up taking title to a property during the term in which I've represented this buyer, even if it was a property I didn't show to them myself, but someone else has, then again, they still owe me the fee. And then item E, and this is important to understand, and we have this something similar in our seller contracts as well. In the event that within 6 months of following the term that the buyer or the buyer's nominees enters into a contract and acquires a property that I had introduced them to on the multiple listing service while they were under contract with me. So that is, again, similar to what we say to our sellers that, hey, listen, if I show you a property and you end up buying that property outside of the expiration date of our agreement, you still owe me the fee if you buy that property within 6 months of our contract expiring. And that's to protect ourselves so that the buyer can't go back and renegotiate a new deal with the seller and exclude the brokers from the deal. We'll talk a bit more about fee in a moment. Number 6 is important, and really think about this, okay? This is why. So item number 6, the broker is a member of the MLS, and the broker is essentially saying that they're going to introduce the buyer to all the properties on the multiple listing service that meet their parameters, right? That's what we're doing. We're searching the MLS every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, to see what's come on the market, to find my buyer something that they can even look at. Whether or not they want to make an offer on it is the question. So I always check off this top box that the buyers are instructing me to accept the offer of compensation paid to me on the MLS by the listing broker, okay? You always want to check that off because that entitles you to keep the fee that you are offered on the MLS. It doesn't mean that you have to accept only that fee, but that you are entitled to that fee and they're asking you to accept it as part of the negotiation of the offer. The box beneath that says, if you check this box to explore properties not currently listed on the MLS, including properties listed for sale by owner or not presently on the market. So if you check off that box as well, then you're going to have the obligation to troll neighborhoods, make cold calls, knock on doors, look at all the for sale by owner sites. I have to say that, you know, if a property isn't listed on the MLS, then I don't know it's for sale. So I don't want to be spending even more time out there. Me personally, even in these market conditions, personally right now, that I don't want to be out there looking for FSBOs. I really don't want to work with a FSBO. Hey, if it's listed on the MLS, then, you know, great, at least I know about it. But if it's not listed on the multiple listing service, how am I going to know that it's actually out there and for sale? I'm not. So I make that decision for my own business that I'm not going to be out there looking for sale by owner properties that are not advertised on the multiple listing service. Whether or not you would like to do that is up to you, but I choose to not do that personally. Okay. Questions about that? Any questions? Okay. All right. Number 7 is an important disclosure. And I'm sorry to go through all the minutia of this, but honestly, I feel like it's important for us to cover the terms of the contract so that you can have an understanding of it, so that you can explain it to your buyers. If you're not able to have a good grasp of what the contract actually says, then it's difficult to explain it, and that erodes the confidence that the client might have in you. Okay, so that's why I'm taking the time to go over the terms. Number 7 talks about, and this is important, that the buyer specifically acknowledges and understands that the broker is in business of representing buyers and sellers on purchases of real estate, and that the broker, meaning I myself or even our company, may have other clients interested in similar properties. This paragraph goes on to state that I will make every effort to satisfy the needs of all my clients equally, but that I shall not disclose to the buyer the terms of any offers or negotiations on those offers, but that I have the obligation to disclose to any buyers who might be competing for the same property, that I do have more than one client competing for the same property. Okay, so number 7, that's very important. The buyer has to acknowledge that they understand that you're in business of representing more than one client at a time, and that you may have more than one client for the same property, and that if you do, you are obligated and will absolutely disclose to them that you have more than one party interested in the same property, but that you cannot disclose to them or to any other party what the terms of the offers are of the other parties. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Number 8, and please stop me if you have any questions. And number 8 talks about, of course, that we're going to have to act in compliance with fair housing laws. That's a different class. And number 9 is also an important paragraph in that when your clients sign an agreement with you, that they are agreeing to designated agency, meaning that only you are representing them. You are the only and sole representative from the office who's representing them. Now, if you work on a team, that might be a little bit different. So you want to talk to your team leader about that if that's the case, because you may have more than one person representing you within the same team. But the reason why this is important is because, what if we have a buyer and a seller represented by the same office? Teresa, you could have the listing and maybe I have the buyer. So that actually puts the office in a dual agency situation where the office is representing a buyer and a seller at the same time, but Teresa is designated to represent the seller and I am designated to represent the buyer. So in that case, we sign a notice of designated agency where we're just reminding the parties that Teresa represents the seller and that I represent the buyer, and that becomes important. Also, this is when I have the conversation with my clients my buyer clients if I may in the future represent a seller who has a perfect property for you. And in that case, we have a conflict of interest. If that is the case, and I've already entered into the contract with the seller, then my responsibility will be to refer you to someone else in my office for that particular property who can offer you the full buyer representation that you are entitled to. So that's the decision that I make for myself in my own business. Other agents in our office may elect to act as a dual agent. It's very difficult to do that. There are a lot of pitfalls that you can get caught up in, and I look at that as an area of expanded liability. So I just make that decision in my business. I let my buyers know, listen, under the rare circumstance that they may have a perfect seller listing that is perfect for you, then I'm going to have to refer you out to someone else in my office. And typically they all agree to that because the chances of that happening are very, very small. I've only done it maybe twice in all the years that I've been with Keller Williams. So for me, it tends to be something that I don't have much issue with. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. Number 10, this is actually relatively new to our agreements, where this states specifically that, basically it's a disclosure that if you're walking into a property, just assume that you're going to be recorded, be it, a Ring doorbell, or maybe there's an Alexa or a Siri in the house, some kind of a Google Home, a smart home. There may be cameras or surveillance on the outside or on the inside. So it's important that we just advise them that it's unlawful for us to record audio or visual, audio or video without being disclosed, but it's important to just assume that every time you enter a property, there is some kind of surveillance of the property. So make sure with your seller listings that you're disclosing, even if there's like a Google Home, an Alexa, or a Siri, or a Ring doorbell, very important. And it's easy for us to overlook those things. So make sure that you're disclosing that. And then at the end of the agreement, you're going to fill in the acknowledgement for the client that you're going to fill in your name and your salesperson or broker's license number as the designated agent. Okay. And here you'll see in additional terms and conditions, which I referenced in paragraph number 6, that I'm incorporated an addendum. So I'm going to stop sharing this one and start sharing the addendum. Okay. Can you all see the addendum?
No.
No, not yet. Okay. Hang on. Go back. Share screen. Addendum. Got it? Is it there? Yes. Okay, good. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Addendum to section 6. And I will share this with you in the chat before we log off. So this gets a little bit wordy in that I did write it with an attorney's help. So in my own practice, I'm going to accept a fee no less than 2%. And generally no higher than 3%. And I can tell you that, and that's just me, that's my decision. This isn't what I'm offering or what I'm suggesting, you choose or what you charge. But anything above 3%, well, 3.5%, I'm going to return to the buyer. I can tell you in my history of 19 years of selling real estate, I've probably been paid 3% 4 times, maybe 5 times. It's very unusual to see. Usually we'll see out on the MLS that our offerings are going to be somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. Now I've included in my contract that the buyer is asking me and instructing me to accept that fee that's offered to me on the MLS. So if I do happen to notice that a property that they're interested in is going to offer me a fee that's less than 2%, then my agreement with the buyer is that they're going to come up with that difference between, say I'm being offered 1.5% and my minimum is 2. Well, their obligation is going to be to pay me that additional 0.5% to cover my fee at closing. And I represent that here. I've never been offered less than 2, if I think about it. I've never entered into a contract, even, like a foreclosure or for sale by owner. I've just been able to avoid it. In my mind, I feel that it's difficult enough for buyers these days to get pre-approved and come up with their down payment monies and their escrow monies. And property is so expensive that I don't want to make the transaction about my fee, but I also want to just advise them, listen, I'm a professional. This is what I do. I do collect a fee for my service. This is the minimum fee that I'm expecting. If by chance a listing that they're interested in looking at is below that minimum fee of 2%, maybe they're offering me less than 2, I'm going to let them know that before we even go and look at the property. That's just good practice, because if they do fall in love with it and now they realize, oh my gosh, I have to come up with another, $2,000 to cover Melissa's fee. Well, they need to know that, before they fall in love with the property. So I'm very upfront about that. This addendum was also very carefully considered when it comes to the for sale by owner property. So you can see I have language here that says, it discusses the fact that I'm basically not researching for viewing purposes, and nor am I including in my market comparable research any of the for sale by owner properties. If a property isn't listed on the MLS, and I have to search the public records for it to find out what the sale price was, say we're looking at properties on Main Street, and 123 Main Street sold privately, 2 months ago, and I should be considering that in my comps. How am I going to know what really that property looked like? And if it was comparable, if I'm only looking at the public record and there isn't any MLS information out there, how am I going to know, did it actually have 3 bedrooms? And did it have, 2 baths and not 1 bath? What was the condition of the kitchen? Was it renovated? Did it have hardwood floors? Were the baths renovated? Was the kitchen renovated? How old was the roof? If it's not listed on the MLS details for me to, really glean the information from, then how am I going to use that property in my comparisons? And this is the reason why I elected to include the FSBO information. There was a case, I don't think it was in Massachusetts, I think it was in Connecticut, where a buyer had purchased a property in a neighborhood with the use of a buyer agent without a buyer contract. No contract was signed, but the buyer did have a representative. A realtor helped her buy the property. And it turned out that she ended up paying $45,000 more for this property than a nearly identical sale that had happened just a few doors down a few months earlier. So the buyer felt that she had overpaid for the property, and when she found out that this house a few doors down had sold privately for a much lower fee. So it went to court. And well, I should say this was a neighborhood that was somewhat of like a tract housing neighborhood, where all the homes had been built within like a 3-year span. They were all Cape styles. They were all very similar. And typically most of these houses on the street were a very similar condition and therefore perceived value. So the buyer took her realtor to court when she found out that this house a few doors down sold for $45,000 less just 2 months earlier. And because the realtor had not worked with a buyer agreement, specifically stating what her responsibilities were and where she was, gleaning information from market comparables as part of her role in aiding the buyer to determine what they want to pay for the property, the realtor was found liable and was responsible for not only that $45,000 overage now that the buyer had paid for this other property, but all her legal fees, court costs, and that is just ugly. And think about that in Massachusetts, where we have chapter 21A in Massachusetts. It's chapter 21 or chapter 23? I think it's chapter 21A, where we're subject to triple damages in Massachusetts. So do you want to be responsible for $45,000 times 3 plus all your legal damages or your legal fees because you didn't just spell this out on your buyer contract? So this is another reason why you want to use a buyer contract, not only to spell out your responsibilities to the buyer and to connect them to you and be responsible to you and owe a fee to you, but your responsibility to them as well. This also specifically states what you're not going to do. So in my contract that I use, it actually states that the broker does not search for, research, or otherwise investigate for sale by owners, and I'm not using that information in my comparisons, in my comparison data. So that's important, okay? If there's one thing that you take from this, it is if you have used a buyer agreement and you're ever sued by a buyer, this is where you're going to be able to hang your hat on what your responsibilities were and did you live up to them or did you not live up to them and are you actually liable? Okay, so make sure whatever the agreement says you're going to do and take responsibility for. It's very important. And my last paragraph here says that the buyer understands and agrees that the representation agreement with consent to designated agency is cancelable at any time prior to writing the first offer to purchase with Melissa Garlisi. That's how I write mine. You don't have to write yours that way, but that's how I write mine. So this is a 3-page agreement. I have this 1-page addendum and pages 1 and 2 of the other form that I had shown you originally. Okay, so let's see, I don't know. Sorry.
Melissa, can you email those or share those with us? I was trying to
You
take
know
a
what,
picture of it, but my
Yeah,
camera.
you know what? I think emailing them to you would actually be the best way for me to do it.
All
So,
right, thank you.
all right, so let's just review. We've covered a lot of information. So, you know, what does the agreement look like? We just covered that briefly. But second, how do you get it signed every time? So get it signed every time by being the professional always in every case. If you go out to take a listing, a seller listing, how are you going to do that? You're going to tour the property. You're going to deliver to them a market analysis that they can count on and depend on and that it's accurate. You're going to share with them, you know, your marketing plan and maybe even your track record. So overall, that consultation time, you are building trust and you're building integrity. We need to do the same thing with our buyer clients. And it just amazes me after all this time that I've been working as a realtor that after 19 years, we have this very specific process of working with sellers and taking seller listings. Yet a lot of that seems to go out the window when it comes to working with buyers. And I find working with buyers to be even more important than working with the sellers because that was how I built my seller listing base over time. I started out working with buyers, and as the years went on, those buyers were referring me other buyers and other sellers, and eventually those buyers were sellers as well. So it's a real opportunity for you to build your integrity. So start with that consultation process with the buyer as well. Ask them what's important to you. What does this look like to you? What are your goals? How can I help you? Great, this is my role. This is how the transaction will likely roll out. These are the current market conditions. These are the experts whom I can refer you to. Here's a great preferred lender who's going to take great care of you. Here is a home inspector who will take great care of you. Here are a contractor or a plumber or a roofer, anyone who you might be able to refer them to help them make an educated decision in making a comfortable purchase. So you bring all that value to the table. So why would you not ask them to sign an agreement with you so you can start sharing that information with them? I'm reluctant to share outside of a lender. I feel like the lender is really the key to the success. Outside of sharing the lender who is going to sing my praises anyway. If I've referred to the lender, I know the lender refers back to me. That's really your chance to connect them with a great allied professional who's going to take really good care of them. And then once you've got their loyalty and you've signed that agreement with them, that's when you can start, showing them property, writing offers for them, sharing your trusted home inspectors' contact information, your other contractors. This is really the way for you to do that. The key to, I think, working with the buyer agreement is not only the consult, but just understanding the agreement and understanding how to explain it. So if you know how to do those things, then absolutely you're going to be able to do it with more confidence as time goes on. So I'm going to post my email address here in the chat for you. And I have to get the spelling right, I suppose, right? Otherwise your email isn't going to reach me. I'll give you my Comcast address. It's my first name, my first initial followed by my last name, mgarlisi@comcast.net. And Let's see if I can share my files. And I'll quickly share these for you. If you give me 1 second, I'll bring them up. So let's see. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not skilled enough to know how to actually share these for you in the file drop here. So just send me an email and I'll send to you the agreement that I use, all filled out along with my addendum, so that you can see, you know, what I've used. I do encourage you that if you want to use the same one, just talk to an attorney about it, someone whom you trust and has worked with you in the past, or maybe whom you'd like to develop a good relationship with, and they can give you some advice on it. You can use either the Greater Boston form or the Mass Association of Realtors form. Either is great. And take good care of yourself and of your clients to make sure that you understand what your role is and they understand what your role is as well. Okay. I hope this has been helpful to you all.
It was very helpful.
I
I
know it's a
realized,
class of mostly me, blah, 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 and I apologize for that, but I feel like it's important. I'll send you my outline too, if you want to email me, just so you can see, you know, where my thought process is and was, and I'm happy to talk with you at any point in time. Call me, email me, anything you might need. Okay?
thank you so much.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Teresa, Mary, Lauren,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
Laura, and whomever you are on your iPhone. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day today. And let me know how I can help you, okay?
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Buddy, bye-bye.
Bye.